It's all good.
Hey, welcome to Modern Day Debate. Very excited to have you here for this interesting and new debate topic where we have two speakers who are going to discuss when it's rational to leave the faith or not. And we are getting started right now. So, with that, we just want to talk about... Oh, give me 1 second. Sorry about that. You guys still there?
We're here.
Yeah, I've got one small... oh, okay. I think I've got it. There we go. Thanks for your patience, everybody. I'm switching to Twitch, you guys. So sorry. That's embarrassing. So, per Mike Winger's advice, he said, yeah, OBS is just trouble sometimes. So we're excited to have you here. Thrilled to have SJ back again. SJ, I want to just ask what you've been up to at your channel. Her link is in the description. And so, SJ, you want to take the floor for maybe 30 seconds, share about what's been going on at your channel.
Oh, well, thank you. A couple days ago, I talked to Bad Tempered Badger, and we had a really good time. We just chatted about our beliefs. We chatted about what happened over in North Sentinel with the missionary who went over there. So we talked about that for a little while. And then today, I had a good friend of mine, Joel Rodriguez, who introduced me to Dr. Lydia McGrew. And she's written a book, Christian apologetics book, and it's on some of the passages in the Bible that you don't realize reconcile. So she actually spent a long time talking about that today. And tomorrow, I'm really excited to say I'm talking to a guy called Daniel Ray at 3 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern time. And he's going to be talking about his book, which is on the cosmos, and it talks about the relationship between the cosmos and God. And he actually has a lot of different authors in his book, including William Lane Craig and Sarah Salviander. So really exciting stuff. So he's going to come in there. And off in the distance, I've got Hugh Ross coming in on the 30th, who's, yeah, I'm really excited. He's going to come on my channel at 7 o'clock on the 30th Eastern time. And he's going to talk about his book, which is called Always Be Ready. So really cool stuff going on.
That's rad. I'm thrilled for you. Man, Hugh Ross, especially in, I'd say he's like A-list. I mean, it's hard to top the brilliance of Hugh Ross. So that's really cool. Excited to hear that. So for those of you who have not been introduced to Nacho Witness, I can say through getting to know him the little bit that I have, I just really love the guy. He's really easy to get along with, and he's really supportive. Like, I think I mentioned that one time when it was like a stream, or was trying to stream at McDonald's. So that's embarrassing. Thanks for your patience. But as we were trying to get this thing going, I was traveling. So Nacho Witness was just kind of like, oh, hey, man, like, are you doing okay? Like, is there anything I can do to help you? And I was like, that is the nicest thing, man, because I'm like pulling my hair out. And I was just like, I love it. I love it, brother. So glad to have you here, Nacho Witness. By the way, everybody, his link's in the description. Highly encourage you to check out his as well. If you want to share what's going on at your channel, Nacho Witness, glad to have you here.
Thanks, man. It's a pleasure to be here, and not at all for that offering to help you that time. That's, you know, just what you do. Over at my channel, I'm definitely not doing quite as exciting as SJ's by the sounds of it, but I've got a couple interesting videos. I sort of focus my work on exposing and refuting the Jehovah's Witnesses, but I also sort of branch out as I have explored different religions as well and sort of see the similarities. And so it's very easy to jump between things, but I also like to have a little bit of fun and, you know, go against things like Flat Earth or, you know, what other real crazy people. It is just a bit more fun. At the moment, I've got a series going where I'm actually taking on Ken Ham. I'm doing a bit of a Paula Gia ripoff. But my excuse is that he's Australian and he's too stupid to be Australian, and I don't find that acceptable. So, yeah, you know, that's where I come in at it. But other than that, lately I'm doing a few videos that are being featured on Bad Tempered Badger's channel, which is quite ironic because you just chatted to him the other day, SJ. Which was, I only caught a little bit of it. I was spewing, I couldn't catch it all, but I'm still going to have to go back and watch the rest of that. It looked really cool. And they are also at the moment either on Ken Ham or the JWs. So make sure to go sub to Bad Tempered Badger. Other than that, it's pretty much what I'm doing, you know.
Glad you're here. So what I'm going to do is basically let the conversation go now. So this is like free range. Debaters are just going to kind of take it in their own direction. It's going to be very organic, spontaneous. And so with that, I'm going to set the timer for maybe 45 minutes. Is that good? And then we'll go into Q&A. Does that sound good for both of you?
That's great.
Yeah, it sounds what it works. Yeah.
You bet. So while setting the timer, if this is your first time here, stoked to have you. We've got debates all the time, so hit that subscribe button for more. And the floor is yours, guys.
Well, Nacho, do you want to go first on your story?
Okay. Well, if you want to, sure. I suppose where do you want to really start? Like, do you want to know a bit about what it was like for me in or out?
Yeah,
or just the dubs, or
here's what I was envisioning. I'm looking at you and I both have some similarities in that we were both raised in a faith, and neither of us are following the particular Christian sect in which we were raised. And so I was thinking it might be interesting to hear your story on why you and how it all came to be. You were raised as a Jehovah's Witness and you left, and I was raised in the Catholic faith and I left, and we both left for different reasons. But then it's like we went through the doors in different ways, because I went through the door towards God and you went through the door away from God. And so I think it could be interesting to figure out exactly how we chose our paths and maybe how our paths were shaped initially.
Okay. Well, it goes back to, for me, as early as I can remember, because being raised in something, that's sort of how it works. It's difficult to explain how engrossing it is, especially for a very particular sect of Christianity as Jehovah's Witnesses. Your entire life is very controlled, and that's in an extreme way, like where you've got 3 days a week you're going to their meetings, which is their church, their Kingdom Hall. You're doing the general preachy stuff, but then you come home, you're doing constant Bible studies with the family every single night. The weekend you don't have kid time because you have to go out witnessing, which is the door knocking, where you're used as a pawn to attain emotion from the householder. A lot of these things you're aware of. You sort of can't have your own social life. And I grew up in a small country town where, and I'm also disabled. So I had all these things sort of against me. I didn't have many friends as it was. And so this was a bit of an extra layer there where I wasn't even allowed to have friends for the most part. I couldn't be that just kid, and then it goes to school things, you're excluded from everything Christian as well, which is more hurtful because you don't, as a kid, quite understand the nuances of the differences. You just go, well, we sort of believe in the same thing. Why is it so important that I don't get to sit in with the other kids and have cake, for my birthday sort of thing? Things like this all add up. I was still very strong in my conviction, though. I was working towards becoming a baptized witness, which is sort of their ultimate commitment, life commitment. At the time, I'd become an unbaptized publisher, which means that I was officially taking hours for them, going door to door, and I'd go up, even as a kid, I would go up on stage at the podium to present talks and do Bible studies with the congregation. It was very close to that time that one of the elders approached me and basically put it to me that I'm wayward. I'm not showing proper conviction in my path, and I don't want to turn into my older brother who had not long ago left the religion. And that line, knowing that I already couldn't have friends, I was like, no, I'm now done. I'm a 12-year-old kid. I want to go and be a kid. If all this stuff is all that serious, I'm going to come back when I'm 18 or something, and then when I'm old enough and bright enough to think about it, I'll come back and I'll think about it. And I did. But after that, I sort of had an ability to get out too, because of the fact that he was using my older brother against me. So my family was like, yeah, you don't say that to, a younger brother. Younger brother's always going to look up to their older brother. You don't say the older brother's a lost cause, at least not trying to bring me back in, like keep me into their religion. Like that was just the silliest thing in the world. But that was sort of the end of it for me. I was like, no, I'm done. And I didn't leave God though. I left the religion. I left the organization. Because I could see in my mind it was still I had a very close personal relationship with God. I was still wanting to be a baptized brother, just maybe not a JW. So I never sort of became a crazy kid or anything. I had problems, I had issues, but it was never I was trying to be a bad, like I didn't have this turn into a bad kid all of a sudden. But I had friends, I started just socializing and being a kid. It wasn't for a few years later that I started really getting back into the literature, and I read as much of the Watchtower's literature, all of their books, publications and stuff as I could. And I was sort of still wanting to get into this, and by this time I'm probably in my 20s. I'm working and I'm, reading these on the way to work, on the train or whatever. But there was always something wrong with what I'm reading now, because for whatever reason, when I was a kid, all you see when you're reading these things is that, what you read. You don't know any better. After going through school and having pushed myself away from any religious organization, I could read these things from a writing point of view, and I could see that these were written for almost children. Even the proper books they are written so simply, but they are lacking in any actual intellect. And I couldn't help but notice things like this now. And from there, I'd read books from other places, and it all read the same. There was no actual intelligent process of writing these books. There was no knowledge in them, and that just sort of bothered me, and I couldn't grapple with that. There's meant to be someone that knows something more, you know what I mean? Like, to me, the witnesses used to represent knowing the truth, and it was that whole idea that they'd figured something else out that nobody else had figured out. And every religion does that. And so I'd work through them, and what's their special thing? But they all say the same thing, and it drove me nuts. So I just gave up on reading any of these things. I couldn't be bothered. And that's when I did start to just enjoy life a bit more, partied. But I was like, there's still a God. This is all just man's writing. You know what I mean? Like, I was still that connected to this whole idea. But ultimately, it was a realization that the only God existed because I was taught God. Like, I didn't get born into this world knowing God. I had to be taught God. And that's that realization that I went, oh, it's just like everything else in life. It's just something that, if I wasn't born to my family, I wouldn't have been JW. Especially in my area, I would have more than likely just been an average, like a Baptist or a Catholic or an Anglican or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, could have been any other one of those. It's just, and it's the same, unfortunately, in my view, seems the same with everyone, that it's just a story. And it's that you have a different story than I have, that has a different story to they have, but I'm still searching for that one story that has a little bit of truth. I just haven't found it. But that's sort of where I'm at in a nutshell, if I can, squish it all down in like 5 minutes.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I think that you pointed out a couple of things that that I didn't know about. One is you were really, I mean, it sounds like you were almost under lock and key when 3 nights a week you're going over to the Jehovah's Witness place, and then you're doing Bible studies every single night. And I mean, it became something like it was so much a part of your life that I can't even imagine. It must have been hard to break away, especially because your whole family was embroiled in that entire process.
All but my all but my dad, who has always been what you would call atheist, but not what I am atheist. I've never known a God. I've never met him. He never said hello to me. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't care. I'm watching the footy. That sort of guy, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, so, sure. Interesting. So I was raised much differently. Catholics, if you, at least the way that I was raised as a Catholic, Catholics have a lot of fun, and being raised a Catholic was a very fun skill. What's that?
I said that's what I'd heard. Looking.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's totally fun. Outside. There was nothing about the Catholic Church that for the fun factor that wasn't there. I mean, we were doing whatever we wanted to do. We went to church on Sunday. That's how the Catholics are. We partied all week, when I was in college and all that kind of stuff. And then we all went to church on Sunday. We showed up there somehow. And that was perfectly fine because a lot of the Catholic people were Irish and they all kind of fit in with that whole deal. But the Catholic Church, not to sell them short, I mean, the Catholic Church is very much organized around sacraments. The idea of your first communion, you're going to have a first confession, you're going to have a first, what was it called? I forgot what it's called. There was another one where confirmation, where you actually have another name. So I went through that whole process. I was in a Catholic grade school. I went to a Catholic high school as a freshman, and then I transferred to a public school because I didn't like my freshman high school because it was all girls, and I didn't like that. So I transferred to a public school and had more fun there. but I was raised with family who were pretty liberal. My parents are they're Democrats now. They're very liberal. They're Bernie Sanders types Democrats, and so I was raised in that entire philosophy. And so it's kind of different. I left the church, and so did my parents, and so did my 2 brothers, when I was in my 20s after I got out of college, because we were pretty upset with what was going on with the priests. We didn't like the fact that these priests are getting away with what they were getting away with. And I don't even need to mention that because everyone knows what I'm talking about. But the priests were getting away with some things that should not have been. It's still going on today. The Pope still hasn't done enough to stop this. The bishops were not doing enough to stop this. Everyone for the last 40 years has been looking the other way while this kind of hanky-panky is going on in the churches. So I was very upset with what I'd heard about the altar boys. I was very upset with a couple of priests who were in the area down in Delray Beach, Florida, where I was from, who ran off with their girlfriends to Las Vegas and gambled away a lot of the church's money. So we had some things happen that my family was just beyond disgusted. We said, forget organized religion. We're leaving this stuff. And so we all stuck around God, but, well, I can't say all of us. One of my brothers has kind of veered off now into agnosticism, but most of us stuck around God. My parents are what I call very weak Christians now. But we never really we didn't have a faith that locked us down. We never did Bible study. I can honestly say I never did Bible study. In the Catholic Church, really studying the Bible wasn't something that we did. We read a couple passages. The ceremony, the church ceremony, is a very solemn process where you're singing hymns. It was actually kind of hard to get through. I never really enjoyed it. I'm sorry if you're Catholic and you're listening to this and it's very offensive, but I didn't relate to it. My sister did relate. My sister still goes to the Catholic Church. She just married my neighbor, and they're both Catholic, and they love the Catholic Church, and they love the sacraments, and their daughters just had their first communion recently. And they think that that's a wonderful process. They love the sacraments. To me, there's many doors that can lead to God. So I don't fault the Catholics in any way as people. I fault the hierarchy running the Catholic Church. I don't fault the people. I think there are many good Catholics who are out there doing a lot of great things And there are many of them who have very good beliefs and are much more focused on the Bible than I ever was. But I left the church and floundered about for about 20 years, checking out other religions, looking into the Eastern faiths, I think kind of like you did. We were both investigating. And then I sort of had that boom experience that God really made himself obvious to me. And in a number of different ways in the past 7 years, but starting about 7 years ago, where I couldn't deny him. And I had to get myself into a more serious position in Christianity. And so I made my way back into a Baptist church, which is ironic because I moved from a very liberal sort of Catholic background and now into a much more conservative Baptist background. But I haven't fully, unleashed the Catholic side of myself. I still have an admiration for Mother Mary, for example, which I think drives some of my Baptist friends crazy. But I do, because I was just raised with an admiration for Mother Mary, besides, of course, my admiration for Jesus and God and the Holy Spirit. But there's something about Mother Mary that's been very special to me through my life. So I still feel that. But as far as you and I taking different paths, what's interesting, I think we could talk about that might be an interesting way to go here, is psychology. Because I'd seen something that I think the Jehovah's Witnesses would benefit from. And it's the idea that when you force things on people, they're going to want to rebel. And it's like telling someone they can't do something. You have to go to Bible study. You have to do this. If you don't listen to us, there's going to be a punishment. And of course, the only thing that you want to do when you hear that is to not do it. You want to disobey, because that's just sort of in your psyche. There's a study, I'll mention this real fast, and then we can start both talking. But there's a study called, it was a white cow study done by some psychologists. And I love this study. What they did was they put a bunch of people in a room. And they said to them, they had a bell in the room, and they said, listen, here's what we want you to do. Just sit in here. I want you to just kind of reflect on your day, do whatever. But whatever you do, this entire time, do not think about the white cow. And they showed them a picture of a white cow. Don't think about a white cow. He said, but if you do, if you just can't hold, you cannot bear it, you have to think about the white cow, just ring the bell. So the psychologist went to the next room, and within minutes, all the bells are ringing. Because they told them they couldn't think about the white cow. And it's one of those things where when you tell people they can't do something, they're going to want to do it more. And it's like my friends in high school, when their parents were very strict with them, telling them they had to come in at, say, 7 o'clock at night, they had to skip the football games, they weren't able to go out with everybody else and have a good time. Those same kids, my friends, ended up flunking out of college because they were so busy rebelling against that whole structure that their parents had put upon them when they were in high school. So I think there's something to be said for giving your kids some serious latitude and allowing them to make their own choices and own decisions without basically hog tying them to the ground and forcing them to take whatever you want to give them as far as religion. I don't think that's a good way to do it, because I think you're going to lose people that way. And so maybe that can bring us to another discussion.
Yeah. And you're right, where it's like with the kids, you give them a safe boundary, so they're obviously not going to end up dead or something, but you still got to allow them enough room to move to, they're going to still get a bump and a bruise or fall over once or twice or whatever, but that's going to help them grow. Like you don't learn to keep your feet without falling once or twice,
I agree. And I think that's one of those things. And it's almost like I was just noticing Brian in the chat saying I'm very against marijuana. Yes, I am very against recreational use of marijuana. I am much against that, purely because I don't want my kids getting into that. Not because I don't want to just say, hey, throw it out in front of them and have them experiment. I want to make it very difficult for them to get access to this kind of stuff. I'm not telling them they can't do it. I just rather they don't have easy access to it. So that's why I don't want recreational marijuana legalized. I don't use it myself. I have no desire to use it. But as far as my kids, I'm sure they'll be tempted if it's just everywhere around the streets. So it's just another subject off on a tangent.
It is another subject. The only thing I could think of is it's very illegal here. It's everywhere on the streets. I mean, and there's no age limit to what the kids can access it, because it's not being sold by a legal authority. It's so kids are easily able to buy it right now in your streets because it's not legal. When it becomes legal, it's like alcohol. The only way you're going to get that is if you have either ID of your own, or you're going to, ask an adult. Most adults, if they're responsible, go, bugger off, kid. I'm not going to buy booze for you. I can go to jail for that. And but that's a whole different topic. We won't go there.
Yeah, that's going down another. That's a rabbit hole I just opened. I'm sorry about that.
No, you're right. That's okay.
So we both took different paths, and I guess one of the questions might be what. And you took a path where would you call yourself an atheist now, or would you call yourself an agnostic, or what do you label yourself?
It depends on who I'm talking to, because obviously you've met people like Steve McRae. But generally speaking, if it's an easy colloquial way of putting it, you could say an agnostic atheist, which would be I don't see there is any at the moment, but I'm not saying there is no possibility of one. Like, I'm still on that, like, hey, if you present me with one, I'm going to go, well, there is one, isn't there? You know. But if I said that to Steve, he'd chuck a hissy fit.
Yeah, Steve is very much into specific definitions of agnosticism and atheism, and he likes to talk about that. I don't see him in the chat, so we're talking behind his back. We should probably stop. But
oh, I love that guy. He knows how much I love him. So it's all
yeah,
good.
I know he's a good guy. I like him too. Okay, so we both took different paths. Is there anything that you think is actually, if you were to look at different faiths, is there another faith that you think might make more sense than Christianity? If you said you're kind of open and you've been looking around and you've seen different books, is there another, like if you looked into Hinduism, for example, and thought, hey, maybe this was what I should be believing? Or have you already kind of decided, no, that's not one I'm going to look at?
Well, no, it's not that I've decided not to look at it. Definitely not. Because I'm trying. It was almost 20 years of, not directly going, okay, now this year I'm studying Hinduism or something. It was just a constant search, though, and I'd be, you look through different belief systems, and even, to be honest, like, once I lost my connection with the organization of the Watchtower and the way they preached the Bible, I really struggled to connect with the Bible again in the same way. And that's what made it kind of difficult, because it sort of discounted all of Christianity, a lot of other, all of the main religions, really. And then these other ones, a lot of them are very, what I've now learnt the word woo, but it used to mean for me was something just spiritual, but in not a God way, like not a Christian spiritual way. It was like a, what's the right word? I can't even remember the correct word. Spiritualistic? No, that's not right, is it?
That's an okay word, sure. So you're looking for...
It's not sure if it defines what I'm going for.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, because, and I think people probably would like to hear this, because one thing I don't know very much about, there's a lot of things I don't know very much about, but one additional thing I don't know very much about is Jehovah's Witness. Exactly what do you believe? When you were a Jehovah's Witness, I should say, exactly what do they teach about Jesus? Because I've heard conflicting things, and I've listened to people like even Mike Winger or other people say, hey, if a Jehovah's Witness shows up to your door, here's what you should say to them. And I've listened to that. And so I'm curious to see, for example, do Jehovah's Witnesses believe that Jesus died, resurrected, and came back? I mean, do they believe that? Or do they believe in the Trinity? I mean, what do they believe exactly?
Okay, first question, yes, they do. If I recall it correctly, he died and came back as a spiritual form, though, like that took a physical form. I don't know, it's a bit confusing. And the Trinity, as for the Trinity, no, they don't believe in the Trinity. They are separate entities under God.
Okay, so they think God is God and Jesus is what?
Jesus is the Son of God, which would have been like the first angel created in heaven.
Okay, so they basically think Jesus is an angel.
Jesus is him in human form.
Okay, so Jesus, but so do they believe Jesus was around in the beginning of Genesis. Like when Genesis speaks and Elohim speaks of a plural Lord, we created, in the beginning,
Yes.
let us create this. Do they believe Jesus was
Yes.
there at that point?
That would have been Jesus is there helping create all, things. Yeah.
Okay, but they think that it's God is God and Jesus is an angel who is the son of God.
Yeah, he's like the number one angel,
Number one angel. Okay. Now this is interesting because I really honestly
simplifying it, but yeah, because he's still a creation under God.
He's a creation under God. Now we do believe that he's begotten, not made. We have that same exact idea. But so would he be on the same level as, for example, a Gabriel or a Michael, the angel, the archangels?
If I'm remembering correctly, I believe they think that's the same one. That's their name. One of them was his name. God, so can you say them again? Is it Gabriel and Michael?
No, there's a couple of archangels who are pretty powerful. Gabriel is the one who came and spoke to Mother Mary, and also gave a vision to Joseph, and also talked to Elizabeth. And then you have Michael, who's the one who basically told the Lord rebuke him, speaking of Satan in the book of Revelation. So we've got, and I'm sure there's other mentions of them, but just Gabriel and Michael are the two big ones.
It might both possibly. I mean, this is where my recollection might be just wrong, because it has been a while, and I know I'm going to, one of them at least I know is supposed to be the angel version, like that was his name in heavens before he became Jesus on earth, sort of thing. And I know that I think that the one that you said in the Revelations is the prophecy version of him, which is when he comes back. Is that not correct? Or
okay.
Is that a current part?
So,
in Revelations?
Well, in Revelation, Revelation is a portending. I should say portending because it's a pretty scary time. The future. So that's
yes, exactly. It's all prophecy. Yeah. So I think that's the prophetic version of him, sort of thing. Yeah.
Okay. So they think, and I want to make sure I get this right. So they think that Michael and Gabriel might just be another word for Jesus.
Yeah, or in one and the same.
One and the same. Interesting. Okay, so that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, because there are Christophanies in the Old Testament where they talk about the angel of the Lord appearing to people like Abraham, which I do believe is Jesus. So, but they didn't. But when they specifically named the angel, saying Michael and Gabriel, my belief from the Baptist faith basically would say that these are separate entities. We've got Jesus is not an angel. Jesus is part of the Trinity of equal value to the Lord, sort of like the way, like St. Patrick put it, as a clover looking at the three leaves and basically saying they're all connected to one part. So that's how we feel as Baptists as far as that belief system.
Okay.
So that's really interesting. So let me ask you this. So when they say that Jesus came back in the Jehovah's Witness faith, and I don't know, do Jehovah's Witnesses have their own version of the Bible, kind of like the Mormons?
It is slightly different. It's like if you read it through generally, you'd probably get the same kind of message, but if you read specifically each word, you go, wait a minute, this is all a little bit different, if that makes sense. And sometimes it's different enough that they can get their own, meanings out of things that are completely different to any other Christianity.
Okay. So the Book of Mormon also has its own interpretation of different passages. So they've sort of tweaked the Bible in their own way. And I think I did hear that about the Jehovah's Witnesses now that I think about it. But they believe that when Jesus came back, when he resurrected as a spirit form, as an angel, essentially.
Yeah, but I'm like he was not like a physical human being would be when he would be resurrected, because he was obviously, he wasn't in his own real body. He was in just a form of a human that would, be recognizable to his disciples, so that they wouldn't necessarily completely freak out. So, he had the hole in his arm or hand or wherever you put it.
Okay, so it's
But
in the Jehovah Witness literature, for example, that he ate with his apostles over the 40-day period in which
yeah,
he was. Okay, so
yeah,
that's
yeah,
basically the
yeah,
same sort of thing that we believe,
yeah.
sort of.
It's just that it wouldn't be like, if a person now thought of somebody dying and being resurrected in 3 days, their physical body just getting back up, sort of thing, and being like, oh, look, I'm alive. That part, that's where it's like, no, they're specific enough to say, no, that's not how it happened. That body was dead. That original Jesus body is a human body. It died. He's back in a human form, and it's sort of just a new, unique one. We don't specifically know what it looked like because we didn't know what Jesus looked like. Doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's actually interesting. And I find it actually fascinating when you think about it. They're really, you never see something about like Jesus smirked or Jesus laughed. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in the Bible that we don't get. We don't really get Jesus's specific personality laid out for us. Jesus gave
No,
him a
but
funny look. We don't get any of that stuff. Instead, what
it's
we get,
surprisingly specific on what it lays out.
yeah, you know what it is? It's like when I write books, when I tried to write fiction, for example, it said you should always basically show instead of tell. And it's kind of like the way that the entire Gospels are written. They show Jesus's actions. They show his, he's knocking temples over and he's doing this kind of stuff. And you can imagine that he had an angry look on his face, but they don't say he had an angry look on his face. It's kind of interesting when you really think about it. There's not a single expression or anything like that except for things like Jesus wept, which I find
That's
fascinating.
a good point. Yeah. I hadn't really thought into it that much in the specifics of the emotions, and that, he wept. That is one that, and I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah, he was upset when somebody had died.
Like, and you'd think that character would act in that way. That would be a moment. But I'm curious now to find if there is any other specific emotions in the Gospels. That might be a nice weekend,
Yeah, you'd be surprised because I've been looking for them, and I encourage you to do that because it's actually really interesting when you try to look for it and you realize, well, where's the part where he smirked or he lifted an eyebrow or this stuff that we could do, or you see in any book that we read. Like if I picked up a book, I constantly, you'll notice people trying to give you clues on what the characters are thinking and what they're acting like. And so you'll see, okay, this one just lifted his arm or did something. You don't see that with Jesus. It doesn't mention Jesus' hair color. We don't know anything about his skin color, his eye color. We know nothing. All we know is from Isaiah 53, it said it was not much to look at. So, but we didn't get specifics on what that meant. So.
I reckon the best way, the best analysis of it was that picture that came out not long ago, where it's like he's basically just looked like an average Middle Eastern or half Middle Eastern between Jewish, rough mix, little man, just average, nothing special. Bit of a beard, short hair, scruffy, not very clean because he's wandering the wilderness all the time. And that was it. And then it sort of, that made that, did you say Isaiah scripture? Where he's like, it wasn't much to look at. That would make sense.
It's in Isaiah 53.
Like, you're not going to be walking the deserts of the Middle East looking like Brad Pitt. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, it's funny when you watch movies where they have characters playing Jesus, and there's usually they have regular looking people playing Jesus, and then all of a sudden there's a very good looking person playing Jesus, and I'm like, the guy looks good, but that's exactly not consistent with what the Bible says. I mean, our only clue we have about his looks are basically he wasn't that good looking, so it's
oh, well, Hollywood will be Hollywood.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. It's interesting seeing that you were brought up that way. Now, I don't know. Do you have children yourself?
No, I do not.
Okay. No, because I was just wondering if you were going to raise them in a religion. If you did, since I know you said you're in a family where there might be some pressure to do that. If
that, no, I would definitely not push any of that on them, but at the same time wouldn't restrict their options, if that makes sense. That's but I would sort of try and keep that away from them until they're at a certain age. I'd just stick to, go to school and, play with the kids and have fun and be safe until old enough to at least make those sort of decisions and really contemplate everything of the nature that goes along with religions, because it's pretty heavy shit. No matter which, even if you go for the more light ones, if you granted that, they're still dealing with some mature themes that I wouldn't really desire my child to be, consuming as a fantasy maybe, but not thinking about it as real life, and then considering themselves within the grand scheme of things in that context. I think that whole thing is not meant for children. And I'm sure that I am strong on that because of the fact that, as you say, I was brought up so in it that it left me with this mark that I would never put my kids through something like that, But as I say, like, if they just naturally found, something when they're young, like, and they feel like they're like God, they want to go to a church or something, I'm not going to stop them. I'd go with them and, make sure they have a good time and all that. But, I wouldn't push it on them either,
Yeah. Now, I actually find it pretty useful to raise them in the church. And here's why I find it useful. Number one, actually, I raise them in the church, but I don't force them to go to church on Sunday. And I give them a choice on the Sunday morning. I said, do you want to go with me? Sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And I go without them if they don't want to go with me, purely because I look at psychology and I say, if I start forcing them, they're going to rebel against me at some point. So I let them make up their own mind. But I find that the nice thing about religion itself is it gives them a sense of purpose. An overall major spiritual sense of purpose, where they have this idea that they can capitalize on their spiritual gifts and use those in beneficial ways to help people. And I also feel like it helps explain, like, for example, we just went to my sister-in-law's father passed away. He had Alzheimer's for many years, and he just passed. And it helps give them a sense of, you'll see him again. And I know that it as an atheist, you can't make that. You won't make that promise to your kids. It's just, it must be kind of hard to say, that's it. That's all. Grandpa Joe's gone or whatever. It's, for us, it makes it a little bit easier saying, it was Grandpa Coey, and you'll see Grandpa Coey again. He's very happy right now. He's in a better place. We say stuff like that. And I think it gives kids a sense of comfort. And even in my family, when, our dog died, our other dog, and my kids, we were distraught in my household. We were just absolutely distraught when our dog died. This is the cutest little dog. I have another replacement right behind me. But when the other one died, we were just we were basket case, and my kids were like, "Where are we going to get to see little Riley again? We want to see him again in heaven." I'm like, "Yes, of course." And at that point, they were like 6 and 5, and it just helped.
Yeah.
So.
I can certainly appreciate that, and that is something that that takes a lot to process when you have such a change in worldview as I have. Especially, it's been very recent, so I'm still going through a lot of these things. And I think the one thing that helps, though, is that you've got to understand that when you go from having that foundation of having a God and knowing that you're going to be okay, or whether it's heaven, or for Jehovah's Witnesses, it's a paradise earth that we resurrected on. And so there you get to see your family again and all of that. It's sort of the same package, but on earth instead of heaven. That's all. You get a paradise perfection and all that jazz. And so I really, really know that feeling of, and I'm disabled. I lived my entire life struggling. I am never going to get a proper job. I'm never going to be attracted to anybody because of my disability. I was counting on there being a God. Like, you have no idea. I have to now accept that this is the only life I've got. I will never get a perfect body. I will never, get to wake up one day and throw my hands in the air. Like, I just don't care. And that's tough to deal with. But what it also does is it makes you appreciate every single moment you're alive. Because before, I couldn't wait for this new system, which is what we call it. Basically, I couldn't wait to die. I wasn't bringing it on myself, but I tell you, I wasn't going to prevent it, because it meant that I got to wake up and have a perfect body. And that's all I cared about. But the thing is, when you reverse that mentality of God is going to save me, and you realize that no, once you go, that's time out. You're done. Once you realize that, it doesn't matter what's wrong now, because I'm alive, and there is nothing more important than that. You have no idea how much you feel the sense of meaning and purpose without a God. And that's something I could express. And I know you might not feel the same way, but I tell you what, when I had God, I couldn't wait till that new system. I had people that have passed that I would love to see again. Close family, very recently too. My auntie just got diagnosed with cancer just a couple of weeks ago. She is my favorite. And now, obviously, I know that if something's going to happen, it's the end. And she, to be honest, she sort of didn't live the lifestyle that God would approve anyway. But nonetheless, it's just, you sort of get a change in your whole way of thinking and way of appreciating each day. And I don't think I could really explain to you how much of a difference it made. And it's not about like, oh, now I get to do these things because I don't have a God. You know, no, as I said, I'm still kind of looking, and I have a damn good reason to be. But at the same time, what God am I going to find? And is he or her or it going to still give me this offer that I once thought was an offer that was real? Because that might not be the God that actually is up there, because I don't know.
Yeah, I'm very sorry to hear about your aunt, and I'm also very sorry to hear that you've been dealing with such physical challenges. Obviously, it sounds like it's well beyond anything I probably could even handle. So I commend you for your strength in that. That's amazing.
It's weird that it came recently, because I was definitely like, I mean, if you'd met me 1 year ago, you would have, never got me here even on this chat. I wouldn't have the confidence to talk. I wouldn't, if I was going to talk, I'd probably, we would probably see so much eye to eye that it's not funny. The only difference is we'd be squabbling between our different religions. You know what I mean? Whereas now it's just sort of the same, except I'm not squabbling about my religion. It's a lack of religion.
Well, I can say something that I think I should speak to, because one of the things about religion is I think a lot of people think that if you're going to believe you're living for the day you die. And I certainly don't feel that way. I'm definitely not living for the day I die. I'm not necessarily looking forward to it. I want to be here on earth making a difference with my kids and with others I meet, for as many years as possible. In fact, I made some major health changes as far as my diet in the last, since New Year's, I mean, it hasn't been that long, but since New Year's Day, I've already made health changes over the past 15 years by riding my bike almost every day. But I'm trying to get myself physically into the shape that I can live as long as I can possibly live, because I don't want to, I'm not ready for heaven yet. I feel like I need, I'm here to make a difference. Yeah. And I have to do it. There's almost like a purpose that's brought into me. I've got these ideas in my mind of how I can fulfill what I think God's called me to do. And I need as much time as possible to be able to do that. So even if I were to die tomorrow and I found myself in the grave and not in heaven, I would still feel pretty happy about trying to make a difference in other people's lives. So I feel like it's a pretty safe, if you want to call it a gamble. Now, I very much believe, I feel like I've had experiences, but beyond that, I feel like it's a sane gamble to make to not only live where you feel like you want to make the best of your life and you want to have purpose in this life, but also to live where you're thinking to yourself, and I'm living for a higher meaning and power.
There's really, like, I can't diss that in any way, because I mean, if you feel that you've got that higher power that you found, then kudos. You know, I mean, like, it's as long as you don't sort of use it to, you know, like ISIS and stuff, use their gods and whatnot, not a problem. And that's why I think it's important to remember that there are so many people still out there like me who, despite being an active atheist, you know, I'm not like a God hater or whatever. It's just like, and I can point out all the little different things in the Bible that, you know, it's not going to convince me. You're not going to be able to get me to believe in the Christian God, no matter which Christian God it is. In saying, I could say the same about the Quran. You're not going to get me reading the Quran and believing in Allah. It's just not going to happen, unfortunately. But there is still an open-mindedness. Like, I'm still going, okay, but that's not to say there is no God. You know, I don't know. And the thing is, I know that nothing has been presented to me that even comes close to actually giving me even an inclination that there is actually a God out there. And I mean, given how much we did do Bible studies, and with the witnesses, it is hardcore Bible study too. Like, it's not playing around, boring as all hell, mind. But I still, all I was doing was reading text. There was, you know, like, and I was definitely trying to find God, despite, you know, and I mean, you could even throw out my actual childhood. After leaving the JWs, you know, you can call that the rebellious stage where I've broken away from the hardcore, you know, lifestyle that my parents put on me and that, sure. But then I spent years still searching, you know, and I mean, I'm not even going to say I've finished searching. It's just that I've finally come to this conclusion that nobody in this world has a fucking clue, pardon my language, a clue, you know, like, and so, like, you could hedge your bets on the Christian God, but then you're just picking one out of 1,000 or whatever. Like, you really don't know.
Yeah, no, I disagree. I disagree for my own reasoning for why I chose the Christian God. But you know what I want to ask you, because you're from Australia and you can tell from your accents, you're trying to hide it.
No.
But let me ask you this, and I think this could be kind of interesting for people in the chat, is because I asked this to Bad Tempered Badger just the other day, because he's from England, and so we were talking about how it is in your area. In my area, in the United States, you know, we've got about 86% of people who say they're theists, and then we have another 14% of people who are either nuns or they're agnostic or they're atheists, that kind of thing. There's like a group of people that don't relate to a religion, or they're agnostic or atheist. And that means that probably if you're in the majority group of the United States, you're probably going to have it easier just to get by than people who are not in the majority group. But my impression of what's going on in Australia is you've moved to more secularism, although I think your government might be not moving that way. But I think you've moved in general to a pretty secularist population. And I'm wondering how that plays out. Like, do you feel pretty comfortable if people that you met knew you were a non-believer? Would you feel pretty comfortable in Australia, or would you feel as if there's a certain stigma about it?
No, I would be, like, obviously this is speaking as if it was people that would not meet my family. And yeah, just people outside, like someone in a workplace off in the distance. Yeah, exactly. Not a problem. Wouldn't be a thing. Like, personally, I would keep it sort of a bit quiet still, again, but that's just because of what I'm personally doing. And, you know, but if it was just generally speaking, if I'm walking down the street, like, I'd be happy wearing an atheist shirt or something. Like, it would not bother me. Nobody would come up and annoy me, you know.
Do you have legal protections in the work? Now, we do have legal protections in the workplace. Atheists in our workplaces have legal protections. They're not allowed to be discriminated against Neither are people for their religion or anything like that. But atheists
Absolutely.
are also protected, and so are agnostics and anyone basically, no matter what the faith is, as long as it's sincerely held. But I'm wondering, are you protected there? Do you have workplace protection? So if someone comes out in the workplace and says, hey, I'm an atheist, can their employer fire them for that reason?
No, they cannot. The thing is, there are ways the employer still can fire you. And so if it's a matter of a personal vendetta, for example, and the employer, finds out you're an atheist and they're a staunch Christian or bloody Muslim or whatever, you pick it, it doesn't matter. And they go, no, I don't like this person. They'll just be like, okay, they were late this day, by 2 minutes. They weren't, doesn't matter. They can just say it. They'll just say it. They'll write it up as if they were and be like, that's enough strikes. Now I can fire you. There's your 2 weeks notice. The best you can do though, if you're really, either well off in a good spot or know how to, get yourself a lawyer for cheap, which, will get pro bono if you can convince them, is then take it back to court and say, well, no, this is unfair. They're actually doing it because, they found out I'm an atheist, and you'd have to prove that you weren't, whatever the claim that they are making, you've got to prove it against them. So
and we'd see the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
We'd see the same kind of thing. It's sad. You do see retaliation. You do see very unfair practices in the workplace. We're actually one of the only countries where bullying is not expressly prohibited in our laws. So how sad is that? Workplace bullying. So
it's a bit not good, is it?
No, it's not good. Okay, so I think maybe we should go to James, because James wanted to see if anyone had questions for us at about this time point. James, is he?
Oh wow, has it been that long already?
So it went a little bit over, but it was worth it. I enjoyed this thoroughly. I appreciated that both of you were both so civil and warm toward each other, as well as so honest. So I expected it to be great, but it was even better than that. So I just appreciated you guys' discussion. And so we do have some questions. We don't have too many, but we are still taking questions for those of you in the audience. Go ahead, if you want to put an @ModernDayDebate, fire it in the comments what your question is. After putting @ModernDayDebate, then I'll know it's for one of the speakers. So we do have a number of them we can start with. So let's see. So first we have, we'll do the peripheral one first, and then we'll come back to this one's just an interesting one. I couldn't help it. So frustrated atheist wants to know why SJ is against marijuana.
I thought I told frustrated. No, here's the reason I'm against it. Here's why I'm against it. Number one, I've seen studies that show that kids who use marijuana, like if you start doing marijuana when you're young and you're in your preteens and teens, it actually does impact your brain development. It actually could hurt your IQ in the long run. But that's only if you start when your brain is developing. So it's not going to be a problem if you start, say, in your 20s. Yeah. What's that?
I said you shouldn't do it when you're young. Absolutely.
No. So that's real clear as far as the studies. But the other thing is, I just don't want another. I don't feel like. I feel like alcohol's enough. We have alcohol, so I feel like there's enough out there that they can use. I don't really like them. I don't like the idea of them doing alcohol, but I'm positive that's going to happen. They're going to be drinking when they're in college. It's so prevalent here in the United States and U.S. campuses that I don't think they're going to be able to get away from it. And just adding pot. I always worry that it could be a gateway drug. I know people who've started with pot and they ended up doing heroin and cocaine and all kinds of other things. And it's not personal because I have a problem myself with that stuff. I never have, but I'm worried that my kids could get in the wrong crowd and could end up with that stuff. So I feel like I want to make it harder for them to get access to anything that's just beyond alcohol.
So don't you think putting an age limit, an age restriction on who can access it would be a good idea? Because at the moment, you got to at least accept that it is in the colleges already. It's already there. They smoke. Everyone smokes in college.
My students show up. They laugh when I make jokes. I talk about it in class because we talk about medical marijuana and how that's impacting workplaces. Because I teach business, so I talk about that. It makes them all laugh, and I can tell. I'm like, aha, I can tell you guys are doing it on the side. So I know it's there. I don't see, I think if it's easier to obtain, it's going to be more of a problem for people. And I just don't see it as a beneficial thing. So
that's super interesting. Go ahead, Nacha. I want to hear what you got to.
Yeah, no, I think I could probably go on for forever though on that. We'd probably need a whole other show. And I was actually thinking, I had a few things written down myself, and I'd love to actually have another chat with you at some point. I know it's probably not the right time to ask, but yeah.
No, I love that. And I would be, let me say something real quick. I'm totally fine with medical marijuana. Okay. If someone needs marijuana because they have pain and, this is a replacement for the opioids or something like that, I am absolutely fine with medical marijuana. I just don't like the recreational stuff. That's all.
Well, I'd think it'd just make for another fascinating discussion, like especially a more focused discussion as well, if you ever want to do it, because I'm definitely a pro component of that campaign there. Like,
okay,
yeah, even though it's not legal here, well, it's not legal in my state, which is frustrating. It's legal, a couple kilometers down the road, but no.
Yeah, no, it's not. My state allows the medical marijuana right now, and I'm fine with that. I know a lot of people actually who are using medical marijuana, and they have certain conditions where if they didn't have the medical marijuana, they'd really be in trouble. There really aren't better drugs than medical marijuana for certain sorts of conditions, which some people that I know have.
Yeah, it's just another chemical treatment for an ailment that we have. It works the same as anything else.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that for those cases. Absolutely. Yeah. The problem is when, we do have, and I will admit there, and we could go down, this could be a huge debate for a long time, because we do have issues with state lines. We have issues where if someone's taking medical marijuana and they want to cross state lines where it's in a state where medical marijuana is prohibited, and you're bringing it in your car, say you're going on a road trip to go from Florida to Illinois, and you've got to pass through some states where it's prohibited, you run a risk carrying your medical marijuana into these states where it's prohibited. How do we deal with that? And so they're still trying to figure out the laws in all of these states to sort of reconcile these differences. And they're still working on laws where if you're in a state like Colorado, where it's recreationally approved, and you're in a workplace and you've got it in your system, and marijuana doesn't leave someone's system very quickly. It's one of those weird drugs that sticks around your system for a while. What happens if you test positive in your workplace and they want to let you go because they have a drug-free policy? How do you deal with that? And so those kind of situations now are rearing their ugly heads, and we're dealing with that in what I teach. So,
well,
yeah, that's one thing. There's still a lot of learning to do, and a lot of research to do in the real life application of these things. But it's the great experiment of America. So.
You got it. So this is interesting. I'm curious because I'm like, oh, this is a fun topic. If people in the chat want to let me know, I'm curious if people would enjoy debates, because so far we've narrowed in on religion and atheism, all that stuff in that realm. And I'm curious if people, because someone suggested, they're like, hey, what if we did open it up to different types of debates, like gun control or whether or not drugs should be legal? And I'm like, I don't know, like up to the subscribers, like if people want it, like I'm willing to do it. But if they kind of want to stick to religion, we can do that too. So I'm curious what your
James,
thoughts
I know
are.
they love marijuana. I've been on I've been in the geek room and I've been on Non Sequitur talking about marijuana. They love talking about marijuana.
That's funny.
You can already see the chat lit up as soon as you say marijuana. Look at the chat. Holy cow.
It's quite popular.
Yeah, a lot of questions about marijuana, so we're going to have to come back to this. I think it's really good, but since a lot of them are in response to like SJ's answer to the first question, we'll come back to them so we can still get to the questions on religion and leaving the faith. So we will go to John Peterson has a question. Thanks for asking, by the way, both of these questions. So John Peterson asks, for SJ, would you say that people who leave the Christian faith must never have truly been Christian?
That's a really hard question, because there's actually also some underlying issues that are going on with that I would say that if you leave the Christian faith, oh boy, that's a tough one, because you remember the conversation I had with John Singleton?
Yes.
On this?
Yeah.
You know what I'm getting at? Because if you say here's the deal. There's a verse in the Bible that basically says, Christ says, my sheep hear my voice and they know me and I know them. He says something like that in the book of John. And it makes it real clear in there. He says that he's not going to let them get away. No matter what, his sheep will not get away. And so there are also passages like the prodigal son, where we welcome the person back. There's also the lost sheep, where we talk about, there's 99 sheep, but we're looking for that one. So there's lots of passages where Christ keeps saying how he's not going to let his sheep go. But then there's another passage in Hebrews that indicates that there is a potential for someone to essentially hear the Spirit and walk away. And in that particular case, I mean, you could make a case that this person was not one of Christ's sheep who heard the Spirit, but somehow a person could get the Spirit, walk away, and then according to Hebrews in that book, it talks about how Christ would be crucified all over again. So this person will not be able to repent and come back if they do walk away after they got the Spirit. So my view is, I feel like a person who gets the Spirit most likely wouldn't walk away. So if you did receive the Holy Spirit, you were baptized, and you had that entire feeling that you get when you do, when the Holy Spirit is brought into you, I think it would be very hard to leave. That's all I'll say. So.
You got it. Any thoughts, Nacho Witness?
I'd probably respectfully disagree. But of course, it goes to unfortunately, you're going back to the scriptures and Jesus, and it's like, well, then from my point of view, I'm looking back at it going, yeah, I remember feeling all those feelings, but now looking back, I'm acknowledging that Jesus himself might not be or the Jesus that I knew, or like if I went from my Jesus, JW, to a Baptist Jesus, they would, that would be a complete, like, he has left the faith. He is no longer Christian. He is no longer, in the truth. But I'm still a Christian. I'm just going to a Baptist church. But that's the thing. Like, you have to realize that, it's not about like leaving Jesus himself, because it's who's Jesus. Everyone, every sect has a different Jesus. Every sect has a different version of their God, even though it's the Christian God. So the moment I leave one, that's still me leaving the faith. To the congregation, that's going to be the same feeling or the same thing, even though in reality I've just gone to a different Christian religion, And that's why now I'm on the complete outside looking in, going, none of it's real. You're just jumping from one to the other. Like, and I don't know how to explain it properly, and I don't want to come across in any way as mean, because it hurts that I haven't even, accepted that I am where I am now, if you know what I mean. Like, it hasn't even been a year. I think it was like February when all this happened to me. So it's tough to try and explain to you how, when you're speaking of the scriptures and when you're speaking of Jesus, that's all well and good. If I was a Baptist, if I was still a JW, I'd be able to relate that to my religion and my God, and we'd be able to we'd think well enough that they're the same God. We'd be all right with thinking that. We just have different religious ideas. But in reality, the moment I switch to that congregation, I've left the faith. It's, they'll use those same scriptures, but then it's the same when I've left completely, and now I'm not in any religion. I'm an atheist. And you'll use the same scripts. Like, it doesn't make sense to me that, I can have that used against me when I would change from one religion to another, despite not leaving Christianity. And then it's still the same when I finally give up, and I'm like, well, it's all the same.
See, I have to say, I don't agree with your position that there's a different Jesus in each of these Christian sects. I completely disagree with that, respectfully. I can go back to, I take the C.S. Lewis view, and I have his book. I highly recommend that anyone here reads this book. This is the compilation of a bunch of books, but within its Mere Christianity is a really good book. The Great Divorce is another awesome book. Miracles, Problem of Pain, Grief Observed. There's really good books in this. But the reason I'm recommending that is because I like his position where he actually, when you read his stuff, it was really amazing because he pointed out that there were people who were pastors in all different sects, and they came in and they read that, and they all feel like it appeals to them. And I think that that was brilliant of C.S. Lewis to write a book that appeals to people of different Christian sections. And I think that that's brilliant because I think that a lot of doors lead to God. I think there's different sorts of things that different people need. Like my sister needs sacraments. She loves the sacraments. She loves the rituals. She loves that the hymns. She likes the music the way it is in the Catholic Church. That's exactly what appeals to her spirit. And she feels close with God that way and close with Jesus. I feel close with Jesus going in a Baptist church where it's very lively music and the pastor digs into the sermon, spends a very lively sermon for 40 minutes really digging into the Bible. I think that's something that appeals to me. But if I walked in a Methodist church and I saw people using whatever that sort of faith is to get closer to God, more power to them. But I think Jesus is the same. It's real simple for Christians. It's just basically following John 3:16. Just believe. But I think you're actually, we should talk about your faith. One thing about the Jehovah's Witness faith that you had previously followed, isn't it a works-based faith or is it a faith-based faith? Like, for example, can you get to heaven based on your works, or do you get to heaven based on the mere fact that you believe?
They have a real mix of both. You have to do, both. Yeah, it's not one or the other. It's a full committal.
Okay. Because, I was raised in the Catholic faith, and it tends to be more focused on works, too. And the idea is, okay, you're going to go to the confessional, you're going to confess to the priest, you're going to say 10 Hail Marys and an Our Father on the rosary, and your sins will be forgiven. And it's very much works-based. But the Protestant faiths really focus on the idea of works being an outcome, an external outcome of your faith. And so faith is actually the more important component of your belief in God.
Yeah, well, basically, they will literally use both examples and equivocate them, as in you need to do them both in an equal way. So, and obviously their works is their preaching work, and whether that's their version of it, and then their study, everything else that they do, just time consuming. It's basically their entire life. Like the more it is sleep, home time is like at a minimum, like you do what you absolutely need to maintain your household, and then it's study, work, and meetings or witnessing or whatever else. It's just nothing else in there. There's no your own social life or go have a vacation and not worry about witnessing. No, when you go for a vacation, you go and witness. Like when you go to the coffee shop, you're witnessing. It's a constant 24/7 thing for them, and that is an expression of their faith. But at the same time, you have to be able to show both, because your faith is also your ability to do those things proficiently, know what you're talking about. Your ability to understand scriptural knowledge, given down by the Watchtower organization, of course. Mm-hmm. Mumble, groan. So yeah, I'd say it's they will push both quite equally.
Really
They're complementary, if that works.
Really interesting. This has been, I'm just enjoying this a lot. So I will go to the next one. And Bud Askins asked, please ask SJ to elaborate on her own experience at leaving her faith as she left Catholicism in search of other denominations.
Yeah, so, well, what happened was I was in my 20s and I left, and I just sort of, I started reading a lot of books by people like James Redfield, who wrote Celestine Prophecy. I read Betty Eadie, Embraced by the Light. I read books by Deepak Chopra. Everybody laughs about that when I say that for some reason. I read books by the Dalai Lama. I just started reading as many books as I could to try to get a glimpse of other faiths. And I was completely floundering and away from Christianity. And every once in a while we'd go back to church because I was sort of forced by my mother-in-law or whomever. And I would show up in church, you know, maybe it was a wedding, maybe it was a funeral, whatever it was, those were the times I was going to church. And my son, actually, when he was about 3 or 4 years old, he came up to me and he's like, "Mom, how come all the neighbors go to church on Sunday and we don't?" He goes, "How come we always go to the pool on Sunday when no one's there because they're all at church?" And I'm like, "Oh, you caught me." So then I realized, and then, you know, God basically placed me next to a pastor on a plane who convinced me to read C.S. Lewis, convinced me to look at Isaiah 53, and convinced me basically that I should really be investigating my faith. He asked me point blank, "Do you believe in Jesus Christ?" And this is after I was baptized for the second time, after starting to go to this new Baptist church. I still was wobbly about it. I still wasn't 100%. And I remember shaking, my hands were shaking as I answered him because I wasn't being totally forthcoming. I basically said, "Yeah." And I wasn't sure. And he really said, you know, just go back and take a look at Isaiah 53. And so he said, who does this describe? He read it to me and he told me Isaiah was written 700 years before Jesus. And I read it and I'm like, "Well, that's Jesus Christ." He's like, "Well, yeah." And so he got me to read C.S. Lewis, and C.S. Lewis, that book, Mere Christianity and Great Divorce, and Screwtape Letters, actually, those 3 books opened my eyes to an entirely new realm that I had never investigated. And so I started digging into apologetics, and I started looking at books by J. Warner Wallace that were very evidential based. And I started looking at other books on Jesus's resurrection, like books by Sean McDowell and Josh McDowell, Evidence That Points to God. You know, I forget exactly what his is called, but oh wait, I've got it. Evidence That Demands a Verdict. So I started looking at those books, and all of this stuff just gave me a lot of reason. Here's Evidence that Demands a Verdict. There's a lot of proof out there. I mean, we don't even need to have the spiritual experiences so much, but there's proof. But then the other thing is, God actually showed me, I had some very significant spiritual experiences. I don't like to detail those on YouTube. I don't want to detail them either on Twitter, but I had some very significant spiritual experiences where God completely reached in. At one point, orally spoke to me one time, 2016 in late September, orally said something to me, basically to correct me for something I was doing that he didn't like. So I have had experiences that have shown me that God is very much real.
Very cool.
I appreciate it. This is really interesting, and I appreciate your guys' just warmth and kindness toward each other. So we have a Patient Beard. Jared, good to see you. Thanks for your question. He asked, for SJ, what is a spiritual gift and how would I capitalize on one? How would you demonstrate one?
You know, in one of my classes, I would highly, this does not have to do with religion. I would recommend that you guys go watch a video called Simon Sinek, S-I-N-E-K, Big Why. It's a leadership video. It's secular. It's not Christian or anything like that. But he talks about your purpose and finding your purpose and trying to figure out exactly how to capitalize on your purpose. And a lot of it is, what do you really like to do? I mean, I ask my students this in my class. I'm like, what, you know, when you're trying to figure out what to do for a job or what to do for a living, think about, what do you enjoy? And I think to myself, like, I love research. I absolutely love teaching. And so being a professor made a lot of sense for me. Other people might say, you know, I love sports. I love that. So going into sports makes sense for me. Find out what is there that's out there that you do in your spare time and figure out how you can capitalize on that. If it's something that's productive, obviously not, you know, sleeping, but if you can figure out a way to capitalize on something that you enjoy doing, you'll never work a day in your life. You'll be enjoying yourself in such a way because you'll be capitalizing on things you love. So that's what I would say. Your spiritual gift is whatever you love to do, it's going to come out. So that's what God gave you to do.
You got it. Well, we have a number of questions from Patient Beard. We'll come back to him. And 0132 asks, for SJ, why is a divine sense of purpose better than a mundane sense of purpose?
Well, I think the nice thing about, and you know what, a mundane sense of purpose, as long as you have a sense of purpose, I think you're going to be doing pretty well. So if you feel like you have a sense of purpose that gives you meaning in your life and helps you make connections and helps you develop relationships with other people, I think that's a pretty good step forward. So if you just have a purpose, you're doing well. So a divine purpose, the only difference is that you feel like there's even more to it than just the purpose you've given yourself. You feel like there's also a purpose that's been given to you. And so when you do things that you feel like you're fulfilling that mission, you might even feel more fulfilled inside.
You got it. Thank you very much for both the question and the answer. So Jen with 1N asks, what would either person do if their child joined or left a religion they were opposed, that you were opposed to?
Pray. I would pray. The only one I'd really be opposed to, I should say there's a few. If my kids become agnostic, atheist, or Satanist, I would have, I'd probably flip over in my bed. I would flip over in my grave if I'm dead. But it's a possibility. I mean, my brother is agnostic, so I have to deal with that. I've actually bought him my C.S. Lewis book that I just showed you. He still hasn't read it. He has no desire. He's too busy reading Joseph Campbell and all these other books that he has. So
you got it. Next, we have John Peterson asks, follow-up. So this is in response to his initial question, which is, do you think that Christians can lose their salvation? P.S. He says, I was baptized and felt what I thought was the Holy Spirit. How do you explain that? That's for SJ.
How do you explain? Now, am I assuming he's an atheist now?
I think so.
Okay, so he's an atheist. So, well, there's one of those things, if you look in the book of Romans and you look in Romans 1, and I know a lot of atheists don't like what it says in Romans 1, but it makes it pretty clear that God lets you choose your life and your path, and you don't have to follow him if you don't want to. It's up to you. If you want to walk away from God, he lets you do that. And a lot of people want to walk away from God and they don't want to worship God. And so he hardens their hearts. It says that in Romans 1:20 and 1:21. He hardens their hearts. He lets them walk away. And if your heart's been hardened, you won't be feeling the Holy Spirit. You won't feel any of that kind of stuff. So you won't be able to see some of the things that other people would see looking at the exact same passages. So, and that lasts for as long as it's needed until you feel like you want to come back to God. So.
You got it. Next, we have Patient Beard coming at you. Thank you both for that question, John Peterson and SJ's answer. And Patient Beard said, ask SJ if she's ever considered that it's one big gullibility test and that only the skeptics will go to heaven.
Well, I guess it's a gamble. So if he can see if we'll have to go to heaven to find out if we're all up there together. Now, I would actually say prayers that all of us will meet in heaven. I mean, I see people in here like Squircifer. I see Squircifer and Jen with 1N. I interact with those two all the time, and I hope to find both of them in heaven one day. I think that would be ideal. So, as far as a gullibility test, well, is there also a leader of gullibility? So who's going to be leading this heavenly realm that the gullible will be in, or the not gullible skeptics will be in? Is this the king of the skeptics who's going to be running the skeptic heaven? So that's my question back, is who's running this place?
I just want to, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure Jen and Squircifer would probably disagree with that. I'd be willing to bet they wouldn't want to be in the heaven. Just from their points of view and everything.
Yeah, and actually, let me ask you that. What's wrong with heaven? I've heard that from a lot of atheists. They say, well, I don't want to live forever. I don't want to be around it for eternity. I'd just assume die when it's all said and done. So why? What do you have against heaven?
There is their general reasoning that I've heard, and I'm sure they could give their own specific personal reasonings and everything, but the general one that I've come to understand is that it is, and this works along with the JW's religion as well, is that you're technically putting yourself into voluntary slavery for eternity. It might be, yeah, you get fed and you have a nice house, and they, look after your health, but you're forced into an eternal life of what we don't know, but we at least know is you're working for God. And this is whether you're in heaven or on earth, sort of interchangeably. And the other one is that a lot of just generally speaking, don't particularly like the idea of spending eternity with that many Christian type of people in general. I know that is a sentiment that is held by certain people. What's this? You're with yes, Christopher. Personally, we had the earth on paradise perfection. I can accept that I had my blinders on because I had my disability, I had all these issues, and I loved the idea of just having this perfect body. And I never really thought through what was actually being told to me, what so even just within the Jehovah's Witnesses, what they expect in that, perfect world. And it kind of is true that, and even in this system, or in, what we know today, their governing body was called the faithful and discreet slave, because they're slaves to God. And that's the whole concept, is that when you get into this eternal life, you are an eternal slave to God. I know that I couldn't really object to people's objections with that. If they don't want to, live an eternal life like that, I can't see, any fault in that line of thinking. Personally, I still am conflicted, but it's only fantasy for me now, so it's a bit different. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't see it as a reality, and so it's just, a bit of a game in my imagination about thinking I have this perfect world or this heaven where I have a perfect body, and I get to, I don't know, whatever God says we do, or frolic in the clouds or whatever. It's just not reality in my mind, so it's different. It's just a whole different thing.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that Adam and Eve felt like slaves prior to eating the apple in the tree in the Garden of Eden? Garden of Eden, I should say. Do you think that they felt like they were slaves?
If they didn't feel like there was something being...
know of the Eve and Adam existence in Eden prior to the apple incident.
So before even any of that at all. So it was just Adam and Eve having interacted with the serpent or whatever.
Right, before all that kind of stuff happened, just what little piece of information we've been given in the Bible about Eden prior to the whole apple incident.
I think that there's a distinct certainty that within that storyline that those two would not have known, but that was kind of the whole point of the story, is that they were unaware of the sin of earth. But the thing with that story is that it negates the inherent sin within God's setup, which is the slavery. The Bible has never spoken out against slavery in any way. It's only told you how to do it. So I don't it was never a conflicting thing for me with the Bible that they were in unconsciously slaves, of course. However, not you're sort of thinking of it like, well, they don't realize that they're slaves, so they're okay.
No. I'm not trying to say that. I'm trying to. What I want you to do, and this is just a thought experiment, because there's a lot of people who've written a lot on this. In fact, you should read Hugh Ross's books. He's got some books on Genesis. But if you want to know what a heaven-like existence is going to be like, we've been given some glimpses in the Bible. One is we've been given a glimpse that Jesus said it's going to be paradise. Two, we've been given a glimpse that it's going to be a new Jerusalem and it's supposed to be beautiful. Number three, we've been given a glimpse that it's going to probably be like the existence of Eden prior to when the snake showed up, in an Eden without the snake even being a possibility. So it'd be an Eden where you are doing things. I mean, you're not sitting around eating bonbons all day. You're actually being productive. You're very happy.
You're doing works
and
for
you've
God.
got a nice existence. You don't feel like a slave. You're just enjoying yourself, and you're enjoying nature, and you're enjoying loving each other and loving your neighbors and that kind of thing. So that's the glimpse that we've been given of heaven. We haven't been given a glimpse where people are walking around carrying, oxen or something on a bunch of sleds trying to, dig holes and do stuff like that as slaves would do. That's not the existence that we've been given.
Yeah, you're thinking of a different you've got a very specific idea in your mind of what hard labor is slavery. That's not necessarily the only idea of what it is, and it's not necessarily even that it would be hard work and you're being you're wearing yourself down doing all this difficult labor for God. It's not like that. Like, you've got a perfect body and you're going to be happy and all that sort of stuff. You're taking away all of the reality of it, though. You are not aware of it, and you're still trying to tell me that you feel happy about it and you don't feel like you're a slave or anything. But sure, that you don't have to feel like a slave for you to be objectively being enslaved. It's still like you're still going to be subjugated to God for eternity, and you don't know what he's going to decide.
Let me unite some religion.
And the other thing is, like, most people would basically abhor the idea of even the God that is put in the Bible. So the idea of, or the possibility of going, he might tell me to do something like he said in the Bible. It's some people aren't willing to go there. That's all.
The only thing that's separating people from heaven in a lot of cases, and actually if you go around, you were talking about looking at other religions in the world. Do you ever wonder that almost every other religion, whether it happens to be Buddhism or Hinduism, pantheism, looking at those together, if it happens to be polytheism, and I actually can't say with polytheism, but forget that one. But let's look at polytheism in the Hindu faith, that type of polytheism, not the pagan polytheism, but the polytheism in the Hindu faith. We look at Buddhism, we look at Taoism, we even look at a belief system like Confucianism, we look at what we believe in Christianity, and we realize that in all of those, if we were to unite them in a certain way, all of them have the enlightenment being the selfless sense, meaning that you're not connected and stuck to yourself. Your ego is gone. So maybe that's where the idea of when you say slavery, it's because you're no longer, your ego is no longer basically controlling you. Instead, you've let your ego go and you've become a part of something bigger than yourself, which is what God is. And so the whole idea of heaven is now you're united. And even you could speak to this as a Buddhist or the Hindu or any of those faiths have that same idea that the full enlightenment is a release of the self and a movement towards the selfless. And that's the ultimate eternity and the ultimate perfection and the ultimate enlightenment and nirvana in all those faiths.
Unless if you have a response, Nacho, we can let you respond. Otherwise, we'll keep moving.
No, you're right. I've heard the sort of thing that you're saying, and I understand where you're coming from. Like, I just don't quite see eye to eye, but that's absolutely fine.
You got it. All right. So we next have Patient Beard coming at you, SJ. And this is, by the way, unless anybody differs, if anybody would be like, no, man, we disagree. When I asked if people would enjoy like a debate on marijuana, which who knows, maybe if you guys wanted to come back on, you guys could. I don't know. You guys seem like you agree on a lot. There's a lot of good overlap there, but a lot of people were really responsive. A lot of people were like, yeah, that'd be fun. So If you disagree, let me know. But otherwise, I'm kind of starting to think, all right, maybe we'll give it a shot. So Patient Beard asks, but do you have the right to stop grown adults from smoking marijuana, SJ? What about people with...
Goodness me.
Oh, and I think this is probably before you mentioned you'd be okay with medicinal, because he asked, what about people with pancreatitis who cannot drink? Is alcohol a gateway drug? Yeah, so I think this is early in the conversation. So some of that you kind of already responded to, but go ahead, I'll let you respond.
Yeah, and I obviously have let my rather selfish reasons as far as keeping my kids away from it out, let that little cat out of the bag. But as far as adults using it, again, for medical reasons, I have no problem with it. For recreational reasons, if they're using it as a substitute for alcohol, I could possibly be convinced if someone says, hey, I'd rather use pot than alcohol. I feel that they're probably on the same level as far as the level of
better for your health.
You got it.
I'm really just trying to keep it away from my kids and kids in college in general. Once they get out in the real world after college at the age of 22 or so, you guys have at it, do whatever you want. So
next we have Patient Beard. I'm serious. He's excited. You can't blame him. You gotta appreciate the passion. So, do you think legislation is a good substitute for education?
Is this an open question?
He said, do you think legislation is a good substitute for education? I think he means like legislating against marijuana being okay or, legal compared to like educating people on it.
No, I think that people are educated no matter what, for whatever their choices are. I think that if you're going to allow marijuana, let people know what the consequences are. You'll be driving really slow. I've seen studies that people who are on pot, if you're on alcohol and you're drunk, you tend to drive faster than the speed limit. And if you're on pot, you tend to drive slower. So if you ever drive down the highway and you see someone going 40 miles an hour, they're probably stoned.
Oh, they're really old. That's the other one I see.
So that's super interesting. Yes. And L. Eddie Stead asks, SJ, why do you think that atheism is the fastest growing, they call it a religion, so I'm just reading it verbatim. Why do you think that atheism is the fastest growing religion in first world countries?
I've actually looked at studies on that. One of the reasons is social safety nets. So a lot of times people turn to the churches when they're low on money and that kind of stuff. Through the centuries, people have typically been impoverished and have typically turned to the churches for help when they needed help, when families needed help, when a husband died or whatever and left a wife and 10 kids, they turned to the churches for help and for community. And in these secular countries, especially in Northern Europe, we have social safety nets that have actually taken the place of the churches. So a lot of people have moved away from the church's first step. And the second step is eventually they just sort of become rather apathetic and move into an atheist view, even though they might not even be consciously thinking about it. They just don't worship God and they don't do anything to practice. And so they're, by all intents and purposes, these people are atheists. So I think that that's the trend. There's a trend towards secularism and rationalism, according to the World Value Surveys, and we're definitely seeing that in Northern Europe, and places that are very wealthy tend to have this issue.
Gotcha. You got it. Next, we have Bad-Tempered Badger, who asks, for SJ, what are your opinions on hallucinogenic mushrooms?
Oh gosh, no, please don't ever do those. I've seen people on those when I was in college. They were a mess. No, please don't do those. You guys aren't doing hallucinogenic mushrooms here in the audience, are you?
I have no idea, but definitely. So Amoros Moon asks, why does SJ like marijuana if God made, I think they mean it, and people have used it for thousands of years recreationally?
They are really stuck on this topic.
Yeah, it's one of those, I mean, you talk about what God made. God also made poppy seeds, and he also made the idea of you can make opium out of poppy, poppy plants, and you can make
that's a wonderful medicine.
cocaine out of the coca plant. So we've got all of this stuff is here for the taking. We've got all kinds of natural drugs besides the synthetic drugs that we've made ourselves. There are all kinds of natural drugs out there that have been around for centuries now. Why they're here, in the Bible, it actually says in a lot of verses, it says when people are having hard times, it advises them to drink wine. Don't drink wine heavily, but wine is something that God sort of gave us. And if you look at Ben Franklin, he said, beer is living proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy. Maybe the same thing could be said for wine, and it's said in the Bible. So I think alcohol is actually okay. So.
Gotcha. You betcha. So for SJ, Eric Lescano asks, what does SJ think of people of other faiths who have also spoken, or I think they mean maybe like audibly heard their gods?
I'd be interested to meet some of them. So if anyone can introduce me to anyone like that, because I honestly have never met anybody who said that from a different God. So, and it could be just because I'm in a Christian country.
You bet.
I actually liked that answer you gave. It was, no, you didn't sort of just disbelieve them or give them, it could be real, or, I'm sure they're right. You're just like, no, I wouldn't mind to meet them. Just straight up, you had that curiosity of getting to know something, I liked that. That's cool.
So excellent. Thank you guys both very much. And thank you for your question out there. So 013232 ask SJ what accent Yahweh had. I'm deeply curious.
He had a male voice, and it was very, very, it's like the voice of reason. You know how they sing about the voice of reason? He was very convincing, and it was an English voice that sounded like something I would recognize here as an American voice. So I'm sure if I were English, I would hear an English sounding voice. If I were Russian, I'd hear a Russian voice. But what I heard was an English voice telling me in English words that I could understand without the accent, that what I was doing wasn't something that he considered acceptable. What I was thinking, I shouldn't even say doing, it was what I was thinking wasn't something he considered acceptable. A path I was considering taking, he did not like, and so he convinced me not to take that path. I made the move that I obeyed, and thankfully I did, because later on I learned that had I taken that path, it would have been major destruction.
You got it. Next, we have L. Eddie Stead asks SJ, if the Bible was proven to be false, would she quit her religion? And if the Jehovah's Witnesses was true, would Natja return? I think he means like if it was proven to be true.
If the Bible were proven to be false, yeah, I'd quit my religion. I'd like to see how you could prove the Bible's false. I actually feel like we have proof the Bible's true.
And just saying, if it was proved to be true, it'd be tough to say what I'd do. I honestly don't know, because I would have that selfish desire, obviously, within me, wanting to, fix what is wrong. But I don't think that I could mentally or emotionally let myself do that. I don't think I would. I think I would still reject it.
You got it. Well, I appreciate your candidness on behalf of both debaters and or speakers, whatever you want to call them. This was just like I said, I expected this to be great, but it was even better than my expectations. So I want to say especially the biggest thank you to the debaters just for a superb job.
Well, thank you for having us on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. And also, we would, if you're new here, hopefully we'll get to have these debaters back. That would be our pleasure. And also tonight we have a triple header. It's pretty crazy. Everybody was stoked to debate or discuss today. And so at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 40 minutes from now, Joseph and Apologeti will debate basically atheist versus Christian. What view best explains reality? So kind of a classic debate, Christianity versus atheism. And then we also have coming up tonight a debate on moral relativism, or whether or not it's objective. And that is Chris from Biblical History Skeptics versus Cerebral Faith. So atheist versus Christian on whether or not morality is relative or objective. And that's at 9:30 p.m. So that'll follow right after this debate that's coming up in 40 minutes. And I want to say thank you to the audience very much for your questions and for your feedback. It's great to get your comments and hear your guys' ideas. It's definitely helping the channel grow and do newer, cooler things. So I want to say thanks so much for your participation. And again, though, the debaters for getting in the hot seat and for preparing and just their studying that they do overall in general and sharing that with others. We really appreciate both of you.
Oh, I want to say thank you for having me on. I know you've had me on before and you might have me on again. And I always appreciate coming on here. And thank you, everybody, for the questions. They were very thoughtful.
Yeah, cheering, everyone.
Rad. Well, thank you very much. Hope everybody has a great day. It's been a pleasure as always. And so keep sifting out the reasonable from the unreasonable. Take care.